Here's the finished version of a chalk pastel version of the Starry Night. Today, I'm going to be talking about using chalk pastel to create my version of the Starry Night. I'm going to be using the chalk pastel in a painterly style. There are more ways to use chalk pastel than in a painterly style, but that's the way I'm going to be showing today. So just as a reminder or a note for you guys, I have decided to change the color scheme from the original Starry Night, from the traditional or the original blue and yellow, to a red, purple, and a yellow orange, which has the same relationship. It's just moved on the color wheel a little bit. But you'll notice that I don't actually have a red, purple, nor do I have a yellow, orange. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be using two colors to create a color mix as I'm using it. But just as always, I can use both of the colors that make up a color in order to create some nice variety in my image. And as always, I can use black and white with any image and with any color scheme, because black and white is always part and helps to create a fully valued artwork. That is to say, artwork that has darks and lights. That's what we mean by valued, not necessarily how much is it worth. So some things to note about chalk pastel is that just like sidewalk chalk that I'm sure you've used when you were younger, chalk pastel is a very messy substance. It's going to get on your fingers, it's going to get on your hands, it's probably going to get on your work surface. If you're worried about that, it's very easy to clean up. It's a soap and water cleanup, or regular, just like a washcloth. But if you are concerned about that, you might consider putting down some newspaper or another type of surface that you're not so worried about getting dirty. So if it's something that you can't clean very well, put something else down first. That way, when your chalk kind of goes everywhere, it's not going to get onto something that isn't washable. Some notes about tools to use with chalk pastel. You generally will want some kind of blending tool. I like to use cotton balls and Q-tips, and sometimes a Kleenex itself. I have a Kleenex here kind of as my work surface, just because you'll see as I pick these up and put them down, they are even there getting some of the chalk on that surface. So it's nice to have that. Now, there are some people that say you should never ever touch chalk pastel with your fingers because of the oil in your hands, and generally that is for the most part true. You want to try to use a surface to do the majority of your work with chalk pastel, except for when you need lines. And when you need lines, that's when you want to pick it up. So I'm going to be showing today kind of the process that you would use utilizing this chalk pastel, going from your lightest colors to your darkest colors and filling those areas of your image first. When you're starting, you want to make sure that you are then using it in a light manner. So you'll see kind of how this builds up. So I'm going to start with my yellow-orange. So I'm going to take a little bit of my yellow and rub my Q-tip on there. And you'll notice that, I'm getting the color on the tip of the Q-tip. I'm not necessarily getting a whole ton of it, but that's okay. And then I'm going to do a little bit of rub on the orange, getting a little bit of that on there. And then I'm going to rub that onto my paper. And so you'll notice that you're not going to get super, super bright or vibrant colors. And that is kind of the beauty of chalk pastel, is that they build up slowly. And you'll get quite lovely shades, and they won't have a lot of line work or transitions in it, which is kind of nice. Now, one thing you will notice about chalk pastel, though, is just like in most dry drawing mediums, the pencil will show, especially in the lighter colors. If it's something that you don't want pencil lines on, you'll need to spend a little time erasing those pencil lines prior to trapping them underneath the chalk pastel. So, but unlike many other drawing mediums, chalk pastel is very, very easy to erase. And the pencil will not be totally trapped under it. There's no waxy surface like you have with colored pencils or with crayons. So it's pretty easy, if you forget to erase your pencil, to go back and get that back out. Just like many other dry media processes, I recommend you that you actually do erase all of your pencil before kind of getting into what I would call the meat of working. And yes, while that does mean that, hey, I don't have any pencil there to guide me, you can still see where that pencil was enough that you should, in theory, be able to simply follow those lines without necessarily having the pencil there to distract your viewer. Now you'll notice as I'm working here that I have to go back very often to that original chalk pastel block and rub more. My Q-tip does not hold very much at a time, and that's okay. And you can kind of rotate it around if you want to pick up more, so you can kind of rotate your tool without having to go back so often. That's okay too, that works too. But those are just some tips for doing this. So let's say I've done these two very, very light colors, and I'm ready to kind of add some line work in here. I could then pick up my tool and I would then add short brush stroke like marks with perhaps multiple colors. And then I would use maybe a new end of my fine tool and sort of help set them back down. And then if I blow on it, you'll see it will kind of settle in there a little bit, which is nice. Now you might think, well, what was the purpose of that? All those lines are gone. But if you really get close, you can actually see them. They're part of the surface of your image now, and they are kind of more there than you think they are. So it does kind of create an impact, and having those as lines help to kind of draw your viewer's eye through your image without necessarily shouting at them, hey, look. It's more subtle than that, which is really one of the beautiful things about chalk pastel. So now I'm going to pause my video, or just fast forward through here, and we're going to see all of the yellow come through. To do larger sections of color, if you don't want to use, a Q-tip, like say you're going to do this whole section, and it would take a long time, of course, to use a Q-tip for that whole section. That is the beauty of the larger cotton swab. And so this is what I would do. I would hold it in your hand like this, or if you have like a box or something, you can set it in, that's fine too. Hold your cotton swab in the other hand and rub back and forth several times, like 7 or 8 times. And what you're looking for is on the cotton ball for there to be color. If there's no color on here, you're obviously not going to have any color to rub on there. And that is a really great way of getting kind of a base tone or a base coat of some colors. So we're not working directly over white. We're instead working over a color that is part of our finished image. Something to note, if you've got large dark shapes in your image and you've got kind of small areas that overlap, you don't have to worry. With chalk pastel, like many other drawing mediums, you want to make sure you're going all the way into those shapes, because the darker color will sit right on top and cover up anything that the lighter color does. This same process of adding colors slowly over the distance or over the length of the project would be true for your middle tones as well. Depending on if you feel like a color should be more prominent or less prominent, you might decide to have more or less of a particular color, but you can always choose to have some of any particular color in each part of your image. Now you'll notice here that I did not place any kind of color down first. I'm just going straight in with my line making. Now this is because this area is going to be a darker tone as the base color, and I don't want the yellow, the much lighter yellow and orange, to get lost within that. So because I've done it this way, I can't use my larger tool. I have to use the smaller one when I'm adding in that base color, because otherwise I may completely engulf those much lighter colors, and then they will get lost and not show up and not be part of my final image. Following kind of the direction of the shapes as I'm going. I'm not just filling in willy-nilly. I'm still kind of paying attention to my shape direction, and I'm keeping my strokes, or my brush strokes, my tool strokes, going the direction that will help to reinforce the line work of this image rather than distract from it. Now, if you have a blended color like this one, it does make a little bit of a difference which one you're putting down first. You know, if I do purple first, the finished color is going to appear to be much more purple than if I do red first. So it's almost making like a red, red, purple, and then a purple, red, purple as the two colors. Here, I've got all this extra like powder sitting on the surface. If I just take my hand and wipe it, what it's going to do is it's going to cause all those little crumbs to smear and leave marks all over the place that's currently white. So it's important that you kind of remember that, and it's not like eraser marks with a pencil that you can kind of just brush off with your hand, because that will leave a mark if you do that. So you need to kind of pick up your paper and just go tap it gently in a trash bin. You can also cover larger swaths of your image by using chalk pastel, especially if it's been broken and on its side. You can gently rub it across the surface of your image if you need to do much larger areas to add just sort of that base color, sort of using it side to side or up and down even. And if you're really gentle, you can even use the small end to get into small areas. But I would really caution you to just be super gentle with this. Otherwise, you'll end up with marks where you don't want them. And then you would use that cotton ball to help smooth that color out and give you that sort of base color tone to start with. So because this is a darker color, purple is kind of on that darker end of the spectrum, I don't have to worry so much about erasing my pencil lines as I did when I was doing the yellow. The final stage, doing a chalk pastel drawing, is to do a layer of color that will not be blended in, but will instead sit on the surface of your image as a kind of solid contrasting layer. This can be done with a single color or multiple colors in whichever area you feel needs this strong contrasting tone. Your top layer of your imagery with chalk pastel is very, very fragile until you do something. And what that something is called fixing. You can fix your image and set it so that it will no longer smear or smudge. Now you'll notice that I just worked with black, and so I have black on my hands. Then I went to go work in these lighter areas, and now I'm smearing that color on those lighter areas. Be prepared to wash your hands to get that extra pigment off your fingers. You can also use something like a tissue to set down on your paper so that when you're working and you're resting your hand on your paper to do more colors of whatever manner you're planning to add them, you're not going to be smearing or smudging anything. Now this will still pick up some, but it will help to prevent you from smearing your own hand across the surface of your imagery. So This should kind of be done sparingly as much as you can. Try to hover your own hand above the surface of your image. Set your final colors, set your final kind of tones, and then you have to do something called fixing. And that is where you would take something like hairspray. There are specific art things that exist, but it works just as well to use hairspray. And you would spray it across the surface of your image. But you wouldn't spray like this close. You want to make sure you're holding it nice and far back. I would take it actually outside, and I would start off the edge of your image, do the line of hairspray, bring it all the way across your image, and end off the edge of your image. And then you go back and forth until the whole image has been coated. And you might have to do it a couple of times, like 2 or 3 times, letting it dry between each session in order to set your imagery without causing it to wrinkle the paper. But what that spray will do is will help set at least some of the chalk pastel and will prevent it from being knocked down. You're not locked into anything until you do that spraying. Once you do the spraying, you no longer can use an eraser. Like that's the end of it. The eraser will only usually erase down to the layer of the fixative. So make sure that you really like what you have before you spray. If you don't have any hairspray, you can of course, photograph your work as is, and it'll be nice and safe in the photograph. You just want to be careful with the chalk pastel image. You always want to store these with another sheet of paper on top, just to prevent the color from getting onto every other image that you own. So this is how to do kind of a chalk pastel. I hope you've enjoyed this process.